Welcome all. My name is Courtney Heba. I am a senior teams technical specialist at Microsoft, and this talk is accelerating change through trust and influence. How many of you are here today because you want to be a catalyst for change at your organization? You know and you've seen there's a better way of working, but how do you disseminate that better way across a culture? I'm sure we've all worked for places where the second we start to make headwinds, the red tape gets thrown down. To lead change or transformation, and I want to preface this talk with the establishment that we are all leaders on this call. We wouldn't be at DevOpsDays Krakow if we weren't a leader. To lead anything, we need influence. But the catch-22 is to influence, we also need trust. Trust and influence together are this virtuous cycle that over time becomes a self-perpetuating flywheel. It's a loop so powerful that when nurtured and adhered to can drive transformation in even the most rigid organizations. When we talk about transformation, I want you to invert expectations. It's not just about transformation of your organization, transformation of your team. It's about transformation of you as an individual. It is the process of introspection to drive external outcomes. When we traverse through the trust and influence loop, we start with trust. Influence is only developed when we have a solid foundation of trust. Let's dive into trust. Trust is a lot like a marble jar. Brené Brown gives the brilliant example of a marble jar in a school scenario, where when children make good choices, the teacher puts marbles in a jar. When the students make poor choices, the teacher takes marbles out. Trust is cultivated when our marble jar with someone is full. Otherwise, have you ever had an experience where you thought you trusted someone and you got burned? So what fills up marble jars? It turns out trust is built in small moments, which is counterintuitive to everything that we believe. We think trust is built in these grand moments when someone rescues us from a sticky situation, when we meet a fascinating person at a fancy cocktail party. But in reality, it's simply the person that asks, "How's your family doing?" because they know you migrated from the Ukraine. People who remember our birthdays receive marbles. Teammates who attend our talks, our conferences, they receive marbles. The huge marble jar moment for most is, I trust her because she's willing to ask for help when she needs it. How many of us are better at giving help? Trust is also fork in the road moments where you go left, you build trust. You go right, betrayal is around the bend. John Gottman, the godfather of relationship mastery, gives the perfect example of building trust. He is at home in bed reading a murder mystery from his favorite author. He's got 10 pages left. He doesn't know who the killer is. He decides he's going to go to the bathroom, brush his teeth, get ready for bed so he can finish the book uninterrupted. On the way to the bathroom, he passes his wife, who's brushing her hair in the mirror and looks really sad. John, in that moment, the first thought John has is, keep walking, keep walking, keep walking. How many of us have had that experience? Or at the office, we pass someone who we know has a lot to unload, and what do? We avert our eyes. We look away. There is a moment to build trust, and there is a moment to betray. To choose not to connect with someone when the moment is there is betrayal. John takes the brush out of his wife's hand. He brushes her hair and he says, "Hun, what's going on?" That is a moment of trust. We have to share our stories and our hard experiences with people who have filled up our marble jars, people who have done small things for us over time to show us they're worth our stories. What do we talk about when we talk about trust? It's a lot to unpack. If you've ever been the recipient of the dreaded, I don't trust you, we get very defensive. It's like, what do you mean you don't trust me? What does that even mean? Charles Feltman defines trust as trust is choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. Distrust is what I have shared with you that's important to me is not safe with you. Brené Brown went through cosmic amounts of data, research studies to figure out what is trust. What are these marbles? And she came up with the BRAVING acronym, because when we trust, we are braving connection with someone. So what makes up trust? B, boundaries. I trust you if you are clear about your boundaries and hold them, and you're clear about my boundaries and respect them. No boundaries, no trust. If I tell you at 5 p.m. I disconnect into my personal life, I trust that you will honor that and not require responses of me during quiet hours. R, reliability. I trust you if you do what you say you're going to do, and not just once, but over and over again. I was receiving mentoring from someone at a previous company. We had agreed we would meet at 7:30 a.m. on Wednesdays, which is a bit early for me. I'm a late sleeper, but I knew it'd be worth it. We met. It was wonderful. It was everything I thought it would be. The next week, I get to work early. He doesn't show. Following week, after much hesitation, I did not want to get out of bed early. I get to work. Again, he doesn't show. Following week, on Tuesday, the day before we're set to meet, I pass him in the hallway and he says, "Hey, Courtney, I'll see you tomorrow." And I said, "No, you're not reliable." And he's like, "What do you mean? I was there 2 weeks ago. I'll be there." No, that's not the definition. You can't just be reliable once. We have to be very clear in work scenarios about our limitations so we don't overcommit and fall short of expectations. A, accountability. I trust you if when you make a mistake, you own it, apologize, and make amends. When I make a mistake, I'm able to own it, apologize, and make amends. At a previous company, Carter's, one of our senior developers had noticed after a release that there was a serious error in the code pushed out to production. He owned it. He called it out to everybody. He got a fix in. A couple days later, it was taken care of. But one of the senior leaders who had a stake in the work wouldn't let it go. He called out this developer by name in the morning leadership call, which completely eroded their trust. And even though the same leader 2 weeks prior had left scope out of a release and we had scrambled to get in an emergency hot fix, but the leader had apologized, we'd accepted it, he wasn't willing to accept the apology of this developer. This developer was uber talented and ended up leaving for a competitor 3 months later. And this incident was the catalyst. Accountability isn't just you apologize for your own mistakes. You must be willing to accept the apologies of others. V, vault. What I share with you, you will hold in confidence. What you share with me, I will hold in confidence. But that's just one side of the vault. Here's where we lose trust with people. Teammate comes up to us. They said, "Hey, did you hear about Cassie, our boss? She's quitting. She's burned all of her bridges with senior leaderships. You should see this email that's floating around. It's ugly. You have just shared something with me that was not yours to share. And now my trust with you is diminished. Vault is not just you hold my confidences. Vault is that I see in our relationship, you acknowledge confidentiality. But here's the sticky thing about Vault. We often share things that aren't ours to share as a way to hack a friendship, the art of speeding up a friendship. What we don't realize is that friendship is now built on a foundation of lies, of gossip, talking about the same people, and the trust that we think we feel, it's synthetic, it's an illusion. Vault is you respect my story the same way you respect everyone else's. Integrity. I can only trust you if you act from a place of integrity and encourage me to do the same. Brene defines integrity threefold. It is choosing courage over comfort, choosing what's right over what's fast, fun, and easy, and practicing our values, not just professing them. When I was leaving Carter's, I was leaving on the table a sizable sign-on bonus that I had to pay back. In my exit interview, my manager, HR, no one said anything about paying back the bonus. But because I value integrity, I asked the question. And HR said, oh, we've changed the rules. You only pay back relocation. Oh, now I can sleep at night. Thank you. N, non-judgment. I can fall apart and ask for help without being judged by you. You can fall apart, be in struggle, and ask for help without being judged by me, which is really hard because we're good at judging and we're better at giving help. We think we're in this trusting relationship because anytime you ask me for help, I'm always there to help you. But if I can't ask you for help and you can't reciprocate that, that is not a trusting relationship. And when we assign value to needing help, when I think less of myself for needing help, whether I'm conscious of it or not, when you ask me for help, I think less of you too. Trust is only present if asking for help is reciprocal and non-judgment. G, generosity. I trust you if you assume the most generous interpretation of my words, actions, and behaviors and check in with me. Not sure if we have any Don Ruiz, the 4 Agreement fans in the audience. Don Ruiz has a fabulous book, The 4 Agreements to Personal Freedom. The 3rd agreement is don't make assumptions. Always assume positive intent. If your head starts to go to a negative space and you start to make up a story in your head, you have to stop and ask yourself, did I come to this conclusion because of an assumption I made, judger mode, or a question I asked, learner mode? I was a finalist for a Super Bowl competition at Microsoft, and the organizer of the Super Bowl had emailed our managers a note for the final pitch off and said, please forward this to your team. 3 days go by. My manager does not forward that email. I don't hear a peep from him. And I start to make up stories in my head. I start to say he doesn't value this competition, or even worse, he doesn't like me. But I check in with him. In our one-on-one, I said, I've noticed you haven't forwarded the final pitch off email to the team. And he said, oh yeah, that's because I have a whole slide dedicated to it that I'm going to share at our team meeting tomorrow. Oh. How many of us struggle with trust in relationships? Should be all of us. What ends up happening is we tell our teammate, I don't trust you. And our teammate's like, what do you mean you don't trust me? I covered your stand-ups all last week. I'm so trustworthy. But if we don't have words or a shared common language to talk about trust, it's difficult to ask for what we need. The limits of my language are the limits of my world. With the Braving acronym, we can now ask very specifically for what we need. I can now tell that teammate, hey, it's not an issue with reliability with you. You are reliable. You did cover my stand-ups. Here's where I lost trust with you. When everyone was blaming Ben last week and you knew it wasn't Ben's fault, you didn't stand up for him. You chose comfort over courage. There's a gap with integrity with you. I want to end this section with the emphasis that when we talk about trust, it's not just about trust with teammates, it's about self-trust. How many of us, when a challenge arises, do we question if we have the skills to follow through? Or even worse, maybe you've let an opportunity pass you by because you didn't trust yourself to follow through. We have to think back to those hard experiences or those moments when we've lost self-trust, and we have to ask ourselves the questions. Did I hold myself accountable? Did I practice courage over comfort? We cannot fill up other people's marble jars if our own jar is empty. We cannot give people something we don't have. The African proverb perfectly sums this up. It is, be wary of the naked man offering you a shirt. Change starts from within. I'm not sure if you all will have access to the deck. I can certainly share out handouts. Maybe take a screenshot of this. This is a really good exercise that you can do with your team. You can also flip it around, flip the wording and make it about self-trust. But it would be wonderful if everybody today could go through the Braving acronym and think back to a work setback that had an impact on your ability to build trust. And if you could answer each of the questions relating to the Braving acronyms. And it's so important to just introspect and help be able to break through those tough experiences. If you're on a Scrum team, perfect retro idea, doing a flavored retro around trust. So I encourage you to screenshot this. Now that we have traversed through trust, we are ready to enter the influence loop. So let's dive in. Let's jump in 2 feet first into influence. If you remember nothing else from my talk today, I'd like you to remember the #1 skill for leaders is influence. What changes companies? Leaders. The only way to change a company is leadership. If I'm coaching at Wells Fargo, I want to make a change. First thing I'm going to do is shift leadership. That might mean taking leaders to the next level through coaching, training. That might mean bringing new leaders in. That might mean bringing new leaders in with divergent thinking, diverse thoughts, diverse backgrounds. But we need to take things to the next level. Leaders solve problems and leaders maximize resources. If you're going to solve problems, you can't do it yourself, or it would have already been solved. You have to get others to help you to do it. That requires influence, yes or no? If you're going to maximize resources, and when I talk about resources, I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about vendors, capital, tools, technology. If you're going to get people to partner with you and provide you money, better tools, better technology, that requires influence. I can't just go up to the organizers of DevOps Days Krakow and say, hey, I really love Zoom for the conference, but the tool that we really should use is Teams if I have no influence. If I'm going to make an impact on DevOps Days Krakow, my community, the world, that requires influence. There is no greater skill for leaders than influence. And yet, most of us treat it like selling, which has a negative connotation. And as a result, we don't master influence. But I know if you can influence powerfully, intelligently, with integrity, if you can teach others to influence, if you can influence across people, systems, cultures, whatever you've dreamt up for your future can become a reality. So if we all agree the number one skill for leaders is influence, in the chat type, yes, yes. So then the question becomes, how do we influence? How do we influence consistently driving results while incrementally building trust? Adding value will never go out of style. Truth will never go out of style. So the secret is influencing with trust. But what really influences people? If I sent the CEO of your organization the State of DevOps report, are they going to be convinced, yeah, let's go do DevOps. Let's go spend 10 million. That's facts and figures. Does criticism influence people? Dale Carnegie says criticism's deadly because it puts the person on the defense, makes them strive to justify themselves. It wounds their pride, promotes resentment. If I tell you all the ways that you are testing code wrong, will you be influenced to change? No. It's the weaving together of our story or our message in a way that tugs at people's heartstrings. Ultimately, the inflection point here is emotions. It is the ability to influence emotions of your team and your team members. If you're going to maximize resources, and I'll give you a hint, it's never a lack of resources. It's always a lack of resourcefulness. People will come up to me and they'll say, Courtney, I'm not ready to do DevOps transformation because my budget got cut or I don't have the right tools. No. If you're creative enough, if you're playful enough, if you're focused enough, you will find a way. If you're honest enough, if you're generous enough, if you're giving enough, you will get people to partner with you. You will access that resource. It is the ability to influence people's emotions because that's what affects their intellect. That's the bottom line. What I'm most scared of is someone making an emotional decision because I know if it's an emotional decision, there's no logic or reason I can serve you that will change your mind. So as influencers, we must learn to use emotions to our advantage. We can never forget humans are emotional creatures, including ourselves. To influence someone, we have to know what already influences them, which means we have to be able to connect with them on a deep emotional level. I'll put it in really simple terms. To influence someone, you have to be influenced. To move someone, you better be moved. To persuade someone, you can't persuade someone about your coaching, your vision, or your service to the team unless you yourself have been persuaded. We can't go on talking about DevOps transformation unless at some point we ourselves were convinced, persuaded that DevOps was the better way of working. So what do? We have to master influence. And where does it start? It starts with ourselves because we are the first constraint. And if we can teach ourselves to influence, we can teach everyone else to be influencers as well. I'm going to tell a personal story of influence. I came in to Carter's, my previous company, guns blazing. I had just leveled up from an agile coach at Delta Airlines to a senior manager over agility, and I was determined to make a splash. That first week, I introduced new metrics, new Jira boards, Scrum events they'd never done before, the whole agile shebang, and I needed it now. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the teams were not having it. There was an uproar. My manager called me up and began one of those adversarial conversations no new employee wants to hear. He said, "Hey, Courtney, these are great ideas. This is why we brought you in. But this is too much, too soon. I'm going to have to ask you to take a back seat while we smooth over the waves you've just created. Can you agree to no actions for the next 2 months, just observations?" My ego felt like it'd been stomped on by 10 elephants. But hard as it was the advice I needed to hear. I took a back seat and I buckled up my seatbelt. Then things got spicy. My husband and I, weeks prior, we had planned a romantic getaway weekend for Valentine's holiday. It was going to be in the North Georgia mountains, complete with guided hikes, waterfalls, multi-course dinners, and I was really excited to disconnect. I learned we had a new brand launch, Little Planet, organic, sustainable baby clothes, that was set to go live the Monday after Valentine's. This would be the first project under my agile leadership. It was a big deal. Our VP made it clear as water that we would hit that date, whether it meant working all Valentine's weekend or not. Now, I did some quick math. I did some reverse engineering. I dug into the backlogs, and it wasn't pretty. Our estimations for the work far exceeded our capacity for the next 4 sprints or 2 months. There was a 0 chance we would hit that date. But what do you do when you need to influence and you have none? I leveraged the 4 stages of influence, which is loosely based off the work of Mike Kottmeyer, but heavy in my own emphasis. The first stage is emotions. I have to understand what moves my team. I can't know what moves my team without knowing them. I scheduled 40 one-on-ones to get to know the Scrum team. I knew what I wanted. I didn't want to work Valentine's weekend. I wanted to go on my trip. But that's the thing with influence. People don't care what you want. You have to find a way to align your outcomes with their desires. I learned they didn't care if they worked overtime. That meant they got paid time and a half. That was a good thing. They didn't care if they worked Valentine's weekend. Most of our developers were offshore in the Ukraine. They didn't celebrate Valentine's. It was a non-issue. What they did care about, what I heard over and over again, was they were craving recognition. In the 2 years they'd been with Carter's, they had only been noticed when they did something bad, when they missed a release, when something broke. They had never been positively reinforced. I devised a plan to get them the recognition they deserved if we could pull this off. Relationships. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Who could I leverage from my past that could help me through this? I found myself reaching out to Frank and Wade, 2 dojo coaches I'd worked with at Delta Airlines who were spinning up a DevSecOps cohort. I bamboozled my way in along with several other senior leaders from Carter's, and it was through this DevSecOps cohort that they helped us build out a DevSecOps MVP, something we desperately needed. And we were able to temporarily fill some key roles, like a release manager, something that was missing, to help us keep up with our release cadence. In the spirit of relationship building, being curious, I found myself shadowing Scrum events of a sister organization, Marketing Technology, which was also new to Scrum. And it was only through shadowing, through building my network, that I learned in a sprint planning, they had a lull in work coming up. I asked, can I borrow 10 developers for 2 sprints? That would close our gap. Servant leadership. All of us on some level want to be the hero. The Latin root word for hero, servo, means servant, to serve. The person who thinks that they can lead by command and control or by title will only lead for a short period of time. The hero has to become something greater than himself. The hero is the person that says, I want to lead differently by taking a group of people, serving them, and getting them to experience their needs on a richer, deeper level. That person will lead for a long time. I have never been the 6 a.m. release gal. I have shied away from the early morning releases. And when I say shy away, I mean run. I have ran the other way. I'm not hands-on keyboard. I'm not coding. Why do I need to be there? But I had a mindset shift. I said, we're in this together. We have a common goal. If you're going to be up at 6 a.m., I'm going to be up with you in the trenches. We are in this together, shoulder to shoulder. And once the team realized I cared about their well-being, everything changed. Once the first 3 stages of influence were reached, it was easy to wheel ourselves into the 4th and final stage, results. We hit that date. We hit it without overtime. I got to go on my Valentine's trip uninterrupted. We had the huge party, the recognition, the celebration. And once we had results, some street credibility with senior leaders, it was easy to propel ourselves back into the trust and influence loop. But this time around, we had incrementally built up a huge chunk of trust and influence, which made the loop that much more impervious to outside forces. Again, I would ask you to screenshot this slide. This is another amazing breakout activity. It's a good trust builder for teams. It's a good, again, if you want a themed retro, perfect. I would like each of you today to think of a situation at work where you're struggling to gain influence. Again, if it's a team and you've got a shared situation amongst the group, that's best. Otherwise, you can share individually, and that's perfectly fine. But I would like you to go through the influence stages, the column on the far right in red. And I want you to answer the questions on the how to build influence column. Again, this is a great team builder exercise. Good idea for retro. My hopes today are that you are able to traverse yourself through the trust and influence loop to become the change. So often we resist change. We react negatively to it. But what if we became the change? What if we led transformation? What if we used the questions, did I practice non-judgment by asking for help? Did I utilize my network? Did I practice courage over comfort? By leveraging the handouts, the questions that hopefully you've screenshotted, you can effectively become the change. And my hopes for you all today is that you can go show your organization who you are. Thank you all. And here are some links You can screenshot this as well. These are all of the resources that were mentioned from the talk today. Mike Kottmeyer, Leading Agile, Trust and Influence Loop. That's what this whole talk's based on. The Virtuous Cycle of Trust and Influence. This is a podcast. Dare to Lead, Brene Brown, Trust. Tony Robbins, Influence. Business Mastery, Tony Robbins. Braving Trust, Brene Brown. 4 Agreements, Don Ruiz. Let's go back to studio.